on that beat.
They not like us. They not like us. Hey, hello family. How are you? This is Naja back again, Elizabeth Turner, welcoming you to our family, right? Where we talk about, if you've been rocking with me for some time, you know that our main concept is pretty isn't pretty. It's what you've been trained to see. Look on the website, right? Pretty isn't pretty. Put in my name, Elizabeth Turner, and that information come up. But today we want to talk about, our young brother Kendrick Lamar put out a song. They not like us. They not like us. Beautiful, right? And he also did a halftime show, right? Where he put out some things and said, basically, we're playing a game here. And so I've often asked people, if we're playing a game, what's the rules to this game? And who knows, what does he mean by they're not like us? They're not like us. We're going to try and explain that for you all. That's the purpose of this session. So bear with us. It's going to take us some time. I want to start by saying this. I am awake. Wokeism. And that's what this culture does to us a lot. They take our words and our phrases and make them negative. So when I said woke, you probably thought, ooh, she's talking about transgenderism. She's talking about all this stuff which I'm not talking about. So let me explain what it means to be awake. I was born Elizabeth Ann Hooks. That's my mother and father. However, when I became conscious of my true history, I changed that name to Naja. And at a later point, we'll talk about why I did that. But Naja speaks to my soul. Awakening is what happens when you come into knowledge, awareness of the true history of this planet and the true history of us as a people. Because what we've been led to believe to be true about us is not even half of the truth. We have been living a lie. So much so. And I can, those of you who've been rocking with me for a while, this is not new. This is something that I've been saying. And so when I say pretty isn't pretty, it's simply what you've been trained to see. And I showed you and taught you using a diagram, and you can go, those of you who haven't been with me, you can go online and you'll see that there's a diagram that shows you how we see an object. And it's not, our eyes don't see, our brain does, right? And your brain will see what you train it to see. So if someone starts teaching you from the time you come on the planet, right, meaning from the time you're born, that this is the image, these are the ideas, they become yours whether you know it or not. And then you go throughout life, you'll walk around the world with those ideas in your head and they become yours. So the awakening is what happens when you realize that half the stuff that you've been told that you didn't think was true anyway, because it didn't seem right. Somebody told you something about a talking bush, right? Somebody told you things that, how the different languages came to be, right? It just didn't seem right anyway, it didn't make sense. And then when you find the truth of that, what happens in your soul is you become awake. You become aware. And then you start looking for the truth. I call that liberation because it happened for me. I lived my whole life walking around trying to be like other people, trying to look like other people so that I can be accepted as one of everybody else, right? Because that's what you feel like you have to do in this culture. You have to make yourself fit in. And then once you fit in, then you can be heard. That's what you think is true because that's what you've been taught. But once you find out that those are just invisible shackles, they shackle the mind to make you function and form in a certain way, you can free yourself from that. And once you free yourself from that, that's liberation. And that's where I am. And I know that's difficult to talk to people who are not yet free. And it's also difficult to hear if you're not free because I sound like a fool to many people, and I get it. Because if you're walking around inside the bubble, inside the illusion, what's outside the illusion sounds crazy. I get it. So let's talk, they not like us, right? Why did he say that? And what was he talking about? I wear the symbols just like woke. I started with woke for a reason, because those in our community created that to express our experience of what we went through when we came into knowledge of ourselves. We awakened. And then those who have a louder megaphone than us, the controlling forces in this world, took that word woke and they made it negative. They made you believe that it means all of this negative stuff, which I won't go down because it doesn't mean that. The same thing they do with our symbols and our words. They define them for us, just like this symbol here that I wear. People have looked at me and told me it was a symbol of the devil, right? That's what they were told. Just like the Ankh. Some people have seen that the Ankh, they said that was a symbol of the devil. Well, see, they try and redefine the world for us based on their definitions, their ideologies, because they don't, to break out of that understanding is to be free, to realize that they don't define the world, they just have their limiting definitions, and their definition shouldn't fit you, right? Just like what they perceive as pretty. Their definition of pretty, and it works for them. I'm not arguing for them, I'm arguing it for me. Their definition of pretty and beautiful should not be mine, should not be yours, especially if you were born into this world as a very dark-skinned, beautiful person. You should see yourself as a dark-skinned, beautiful person, not compared to them, but just as yourself. So, with that said, let's talk about the Ankh. The Ankh, and here's one on the screen. The Ankh is a symbol that represents life. It's an old symbol, ancient. It's been around thousands of years, and I didn't say 1,000, thousands, goes way back. And what does it mean? Well, the top part of the Ankh is like a circle, and that represents the female. The bottom part of the Ankh is like a shiv, right? And that represents the male. And then the line that comes between them, comes across, represents the child. And in that mother, father, child, you get the understanding of life. Because that's how we produce life on this family. It takes a mother, a father, and then children, right? That's how life proceeds. That being true, that was the symbol, and that represented black people for a long time on the continent. You'll see them all over, right? But remember, even on the continent, some of this stuff has been changed. But just know those of us who studied have learned this, relearned, because there's nothing new under the sun. Another thing you have to understand is the world is not 2,000 years old, right? This world, first the planet, they say, has been spinning for 4 billion years. But humans have been collecting and compiling history for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, I can prove that, but I can't do it right now. It's just so much stuff that we can do in a limited space, right? We have to keep our thoughts concise. I have to keep telling myself that because I have tendencies to go off. But here we go. The Ankh, mother, father, child. That was the symbol of African people. Another symbol comes on the scene about 2,000 years ago, and that symbol was the cross. So we're talking about them and us, two different cultures. Now, I'm not going to tell you who the them and us are, because things have changed for people, and you have to decide where you fit in, right? The cross, that's the symbol. It's the symbol that represents, and these are not my words. This is what they say the cross represents. As opposed to one that represented man, woman, and child, the cross represents what? Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Because we're dealing with two different cultures. This one understood life this way. The other symbol, the us, represents life and projected it forward another way. Now, where does this come from? Why man, Father, or Father, Son, and Holy Ghost? What's missing from that symbol? What was taken out? The woman. And why was the woman taken out? Because if you go back and you study the culture of them, right, you will find that women never were considered equal citizens, equal people. They were always the property of their owner. So if you're going to put forth a symbol, and you have to understand, human beings create symbols. We create the symbol and then we give them the meaning. Nothing on this planet drops down from some star up in space and then we adopt it. Everything that is here has been created from the minds of human beings, and then we project that forward to the world. So, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. The woman is taken out. Now, I could go over some history of the Romans and Greeks, and you'll see that you don't find many images of the female, right? In fact, the czars of that day felt like the highest form of beauty, talking about what we perceive as beauty, was found in the young male form. I could read you some passages of that. In fact, you think transgenderism is new. There was a Caesar, a czar, I think he was a Caesar, you look this up. His name was Nero, and he had a wife, but remember, these cultures didn't necessarily believe in men and women together. That was not their way. It was all about the men, and actually their highest form of sex was with a little boy, a young male boy, right? Not from me, as said by Plato. Look it up. So Nero killed his wife, his pregnant wife. This is in the history. And then he finds a boy that looks like, he said it looks like this wife, and he castrates the boy. They did a lot of this. This is not a unique experience. They castrated a lot of males and made them live as castrated. They called them eunuchs, right? Look all this up. So this was an idea that was in this culture. This was a way that they behaved and a way that they believed that they lived. So you have to understand, when the Ankh meets the cross, this is two different ideologies, two different ways of existing on this planet, and they're not the same. So when they come together and they start to go forward as a people, you're going to find that many things differ and many things come out of that. And you'll have to study this for yourself, get your own understanding. Because nothing that I say do I want you to just take and run with it. In fact, you should not take and run with anything that anyone says, not these days. We are at the position where we have to look at everything that we believe, analyze it, research it, and not just with ChatGPT or any other AI. Go back and read some books. And what you have to know is the people who control where you go to get your definitions and sources, they control what you think. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So we need to branch out, study, research many different sources. I'm gonna tell you a funny story. Miss Turner, was talking to a flat earther. Can you believe that? Someone who believes that the earth is flat. And I get it. I know why they believe that. Why? So if I show you an image of the solar system, talking about history, African people and what they believed, they studied this planet and the animal life on it to come to a greater understanding of themselves. If you go back far enough in history, you have to understand human beings didn't know where babies come from. You have to think and go back in your mind, right? We had to figure that out. We had to learn that. And when they learned it, they created a symbol and put forth an idea. Oh, life is man, woman, and child. Not everybody believed that. You still have to know that. And we know, I just gave you an example, there was another culture, and they didn't live by those ideas, because they kept all the women herded together, and it wasn't like men and women get together and have children. They didn't believe that. And I just told you, not from my words, but from their own. Read Plato, read many of them, and you'll find that the highest form of sex, they thought, was between a man and a boy. So that's the symbol, right? Let's go beneath the symbol and look at some ideas. So if you read, now where are you going to go to read this, right? Not to the internet. Got to find some books, brothers and sisters. If you read Herodotus, and he's talking about Ethiopians and who they were and what they lived by and what they believed, because this is where we get our understanding of history. We have to read the people who lived back then, read what they said about it, and then we have to take that and move forward. And when you go to college, they always talk about Herodotus, Plato. They talk about all the Greeks. They've taught you that the Greeks are the ones who taught philosophy, mathematics, science, everything to the world. And all of that is a lie. because the Greeks went into Egypt, what they called Egypt, and that's where they studied, went into Africa, and that's where they learned. That's where they learned everything that they knew, right? You have to study that for yourself. Again, don't take my word for it. But the concept that was developed on the continent-wide, it's called Ubuntu. Ubuntu, U-B-U-N-T-U. And it's an idea that I exist because we are, and we are because I am. Now, even as I say that, I know that many people don't understand it, because you can say something and then still not understand it. But so I'm gonna try and give you a metaphor so you can see it. It's like if you look at a glass of water, right? And you're drinking that glass of water, you can see it full, that lovely, refreshing glass of water that human beings need in order to live, right? That water is made up of molecules of H2O, and you've heard this before. Two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom bond together, they make water. And in that glass of water, there are literally trillions, billions, I couldn't even count how high, but so many molecules of water. And just one of those molecules is light enough to float and get to the gaseous state, right? Because water occupies 3 states: solid, liquid, and gas. You've heard that before. That means that one molecule of water by itself is nothing. I mean, our bodies use it. That's how our bodies use it, one molecule at a time. But for us, you couldn't drink it. One by itself is nothing. But you take all of those molecules and you put them together, and you have water, which is this force which is effective. That's us. Still, look, that's the same as us. We as individuals are nothing. We have no power by ourselves. Animals understand this, which is why most animals don't live or exist by themselves. They exist in packs, right? Because it's not just you, you need others. That's Ubuntu. I am because we are. Now, that is a way of thinking, and it's a philosophy, it's a governance, it's a way of being in the world. Now, compare that to what you've learned here in the United States, because you're in this culture and you know it. You know what the ideology is underneath the culture, because you've heard it so many times. How do we exist in this culture? Is it about the we, or is it about the I? It's about the I. What do they say? Rugged, what's the worst of it? You've heard it. Rugged, there you go. Rugged individualism, that's right. Every man for himself. You gotta do for self. It's all about you and what you can get for yourself. That is the culture on this other side, underneath the cross. It's not about protecting and providing for us. It's about me. Now, there's a reason for this. I can teach you the reason too, because it's steeped in the history, but then that'll take us off track. But this culture is about me, doing for yourself. And if you think about the leaders, what they've had is czars or Caesars. Even in France, the so-called, and even today, still today, what you call the president and the senators, congressmen, those leaders don't really look out for the people. They say they do, but it's not really in their head to do so. Let me go back real quick on the other side. In Africa, they said that there was a table that was always prepared, and you can read this for yourself, always prepared on the continent. And I forget in which state, but in which country, but I would imagine it was all over. That there was a table that was always prepared with food, which anyone could go there and eat, which meant no one ever had to be hungry. And if you think about the necessities that human beings need, food would be one of them. So they ensured, again, from this philosophy, I am because we are, nobody starves, no one suffers. Everyone has what they need to survive. That's so important to human beings, as opposed to over here, do for self, get your own. It's all about you and what you can do for your little blood group or your little group of people. You see, that's a different philosophy, different symbols, different ideologies. What? They're not like us. They're not like us. It goes deeper than you understand. So, Ubuntu. That's underneath the Ankh and the way they see themselves. And again, that's important to understand. when we're talking about I am because we are, it's not just a statement. It means that these people are attached to one another. They have created a safe space for all of these people who have this ideology to believe and live and exist and grow and reach their full potential. And that's what we want to do, as opposed to this other ideology. And out of that comes forms of what you call democracy, communism, socialism, these different systems. But these three systems, which the system itself wouldn't have to be bad, but the people who put this system in place believe in rugged individualism, do for self, get yours. They also believe very strongly that their sense of self is very much involved in how much you can acquire, materialism, how much you can get for yourself. And that's a very selfish way of being on this planet, and you'd have to understand that, as opposed to I am because we are. Two different ideologies. They're not like us. They're not like us. Remember that. What's the us and what's the them? And then you have to figure out, where do you fit in this society? Where do you want to fit? Now, my main thing is we're living an illusion anyway, because most of the concepts we've been taught that have been told are true about the planet are not true. It's just what we've been taught, and because we were taught it at such a very young age, we believe it, and it has become our reality. They have made their way of thinking our reality. So much so that, I'll speak about myself, before I was awakened, I would not even come out the house without having my so-called hair. I never wore a wig, that's not me. But having my hair a certain way, my makeup on, I couldn't go nowhere and do nothing without looking, making sure I fit in, and then I could go forward. Of course, you can see I let all that go. So, Ubuntu, let's go back to the concept, right? Now, I told you earlier I was talking to a brother who was a flat earther. And why? Because this is another part of they're not like us. On the continent, going back for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, when you understand the true history of our planet, they were studying this planet, the life on this planet, the solar system. They figured out the days. Most people don't even understand what is a day. The earth rotating and revolving, a day, a year, all of those things were figured out, studied, first observed, studied, and figured out on the planet of Africa, on the continent of Africa, right? And once they learned that, they sent that information around the world. So when you see the zodiac, you understand that the oldest zodiacs, we call it the zodiac, but that actually is a representation of our entire solar system. And you'll see them all over the world. That was studied first on the continent of Africa. Now, when the Europeans, not I told you, but our ancestors tell us that the Europeans went into Africa, and there they learned these concepts. They learned the truth of the solar system. They learned how the earth revolves around the sun. But then they took that back up into Greece, and do you know that they changed it? They changed it to fit their way, just like I told you, they changed words, they changed woke to fit what they wanted it to reach. They changed our symbols and teach that they're the devil and of the devil. That's their demonic way of thinking, not ours. But they also changed the solar system. Now, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but this explains the flat earthers. Look up heliocentric and geocentric. Heliocentric is what our ancestors put forth, that the sun is in the center of the universe, or at the center of our solar system, and you have planets revolving around it, right? At first they said, our ancestors said 9, and now they're saying 8. You've heard recently that they've taken Pluto out, right? But our ancestors said that 9 planets revolve around the sun. Well, there is a theory that came out of Rome or Greek, geocentric theory. And people believed it for a long time. And what that geocentric, geo means earth, centric means the center. They also like to make words confusing, which is why you always have to go to the root of word when you start studying. But they made, and I want to show you images of this, the geocentric theory has earth in the center and the sun and the planets revolving around that. So that geocentric theory, which was wrong, but it lasted for about 50 years, and I'm approximating because I don't have the dates in front of me, but when you look this up, you'll find it for yourself. People believed that the earth was the center, which, if you think that the whole world was made for you and you are the center of the universe and everything is about you, you would put yourself in the center. And that's what they did in the geocentric theory. And that theory was what all the people on the planet who were under the Western system of understanding went by that for at least 50 years until someone came along and said that, oh, this is wrong, this is a lie. Look that up for yourself. And so if you can believe that, I can easily believe how people have been instructed and taught that the earth is flat, right? But there is so much proof that I can show you. All you have to do is travel, actually. If you've ever traveled outside of the United States, get on a cruise ship and go beyond the horizon, and then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. For instance, Australia is below the equator and in a different place. So even our perceptions of what we're seeing are not the same. But between you and me, just know that the earth is not flat, it is round. And it's round because everything in our solar system is round. There's no flat discs out there. There are asteroids, and even asteroids, comets, and all that. Those are not flat. So flat is an illusion, right? Where do we start? They're not like us. That is a true statement. The Ankh represents life, mother, father, and child. The cross, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Different ideologies, Ubuntu over here. You can call it democracy, communism, socialism, but underneath that is this idea of rugged individualism. And there's a reason for that, and maybe in a later video, or I can tell you yourself, if you look up Diop, Sheikh Anta Diop, and his two cradle theory of how Africans came to be and why they developed the culture they developed, and Europeans and why they developed the culture they developed. All people come from one people, that is true. Life started in Africa. I've done videos about this, and they're all out there anyway. But life started from Africa and then spread to other places. That too is true. So the first people that go onto every continent, those first people would have been black. And from there, they changed and became something different. Well, Ms. Turner, how can you say that? How do you know that's true? The history is there, the records are there. It can be proven, but I'm gonna leave you with this. The polar bear, and then people will be thinking, why is she talking about polar bears? What they got to do with us? Polar bears are mammals, which means they have live births, just like us. So the polar bear, which you see is that white, beautiful polar bear, right? The bear that initially went up north and became white was the black bear, right? Or a bear of color. It became white or turned white because it was up north, caught in the ice and the cold in that climate. So it changed. And if you don't believe me, look it up right now. Underneath that white skin, the polar bear is still black. It's born black. Now, we put a lot out there for today. Let's end with the earth is not flat. Ubuntu, I am because we are. And the Ankh. Look up those symbols. Find out about yourself. Learn to love yourself. This is not against, it's not anti-anything. I've not told you anything that is just my opinion, because there's too many opinions out there already. What I have given you is straight science. All you do is look it up, study it for yourself. We talk about Nero, many different things. And with that, brothers and sisters, I'm gonna leave you for now. Be blessed.